Yes, Madam Chair, we have started the recording. You are welcome to call your meeting to order.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the March 1st meeting of the Community Homeless Advisory Board. And it's this beautiful, hopeful March 1st morning. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And why don't we have, let's have Harlow Skockham. Why don't you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Harlow. All right, Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Yes, Madam Chair, roll call for the March 1st Community Homelessness Advisory Board meeting. Jardin?
Present.
Thank you. Delgado?
Here.
Lawson?
Here.
Dare?
Here.
Thank you. Hill?
Here.
And Lucy?
It looks like
He's
on.
on. I think he's just muted. So we will mark the body as present. Madam Chair, you do have a quorum of the CHAB today.
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry, I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, at this time, we will move into public comment.
Madam Chair, I would like to note for the record, items in this first section of public comment are those that were received before 4 p.m. The business day prior to our meeting. This is for general public comment, not reserved for specific items on our agenda. It should be noted that we received 2 public comments that have been submitted to the board and are part of the official record. The board received them individually. Those will be available for review. Additionally, we do have general public comment received after 4 p.m. Those will be presented to the body prior to adjournment and will be in our last closing public comment under item 12.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I did want to acknowledge, we have received a number of emails related to police and social workers and funding. There is nothing on today's agenda that relates to that topic. So we are not at liberty to discuss that. However, we will be having an update at next month's meeting where we will encompass a lot of the points that were in a number of those letters that we received. Okay, Madam Clerk, moving on, item 4, the approval of the agenda. May I get a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Item 5, the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, item 6, presentation on Haven for Hope. Madam Clerk, let's move over whoever is giving this presentation. I'm excited about this.
Madam Chair, at this time, we will be moving over David Wett, I believe. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize. You can correct that on the record. We'll now transition him over to a panelist. David, you are live on our end. You should be able to screen share and be able to start your presentation.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can figure out the screen share. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep, we can hear you and see.
Fantastic. So thank you for having me this morning. I want to give everybody a quick rundown of Haven for Hope in San Antonio and Bexar County. So briefly touch upon our mission. Our mission is to offer a place of hope and new beginnings. We strongly believe in our core values, which we teach and ingrain in all of our employees, which is radical compassion, servant leadership, pursuit of excellence, and being driven by hope. So before there was Haven, you can see the area. before we rehab the area. We're located about 1.5 miles out of the downtown core, pretty much 1.5 miles from the Alamo itself. You can see the area before was just a collection of old buildings, warehouses, an old ice cream factory. It was where a lot of the homeless population had already lived before we opened. So looking at our campus today, this is a map of our 22-acre campus. So it's inclusive of our partner providers, like our healthcare providers, like medical, vision, and dental. The core of our campus, which is our transformational services and our courtyard, and our dorms, our family dorm, women's dorm, and men's dorm. And then over to the left side, you see the terraces at Haven for Hope, and that is a low-income apartment complex property run by one of our partners, Prospera, and 50% of those units are set aside for graduates from our program. So this is our campus today. This is a picture of our transformational campus, and that building right here in the middle, that's our men's dorm. Down here is over here on to the right is our transformational center, and this is our transformational center and our spiritual services chapel. So succinctly and briefly, the Haven for Hope model is comprehensive services that are all co-located in one area in our 22-acre campus. It's leveraging this collaborative relationships and partnerships that we have with other social service and homeless service providers. And our goal is not just to provide immediate shelter, but yes, we do provide immediate shelter, but it's to address those root causes of homelessness, whether it's systemic poverty, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's loss of jobs and eviction. Either Haven provides those programs to help remediate those issues, or our partners provide those programs on campus to help remediate those issues. We find it's very important to treat all our members with dignity and respect. One of the ways we do that, I think one of the things that's ingenious about Haven's model is that we've strongly leaned into the peer model. The peers are individuals who have history with homelessness, mental health recovery, substance use recovery, or incarceration. About 20% of our workforce are peers. 10% are in the peer designation. So that means that the other 10% have matriculated into higher roles within Haven. At one of my teams, the specialty programs team, I was kind of gobsmacked last week when I realized that every manager or coordinator in that program was a peer that either been through Haven or have graduated out of homelessness in another community. We're also big believers in recovery and trauma, spiritual services. Spiritual services not being mandated, but being an optional program where we have volunteers who help guide our clients to the spiritual journey and whatever that spiritual journey means to them. And last but not least, and I'd say most importantly, housing first orientation. So everybody coming into any of our programs, they have housing first, housing opportunities open to them. It's not mandated. On one side of the campus, I'll get to that in a second, it's mandated, but on the courtyard, it's not mandated. But we want to make sure that there is a path to sustainable housing for everybody who comes through our system. And I want to touch upon briefly our main two shelter options. The first is the courtyard. The courtyard is a low barrier. Yes?
David, is there a way that you can expand your slides to the full screen? Because we can see like the top of your computer. Is there a way to make this full screen? It's just really small on here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
David, at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see currently there's slide mode next to the notes down on the bottom. You'll see a little gray box. If you click 3 over, 1, 2, 3.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, that's good. Do y'all need me to go back to anything?
No, it's just this one was really small. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for telling me. So our shelter options, the first is the courtyard. It's a low barrier, climate controlled, indoor sleeping and day shelter. It's open to all individuals over 18. There's no maximum length of stay. It's really, we take everybody. There's no ID necessary, no proof of Bexar County residency. We don't require a drug test to come in. If you're a registered sex offender, you're welcome. But we do have some limited rules, and those rules are all safety oriented. So you can't bring any drugs or weapons inside. You can't have any extreme acts of violence against another staff member or another client. But that's pretty much it. And we encourage those who are currently under the influence of alcohol or drugs to come in to access shelter. We know that those who are currently on influence sleeping on the street, they're at a higher rate of their vulnerability to be attacked or to have a negative outcome. So we want them to be safe with us. And a couple of reasons. One, it reduces the amount of on the street homelessness in the city. And the second one is that it provides a safe area for us to begin our transformational work on those individuals. And on the courtyard, we don't mandate transformational services. We have them available. We have housing services available, employment services available, counseling and clinical services available. But if you come in as a client, we don't mandate that you participate if you're a courtyard resident. But the longer you stay and the more time we have to work with you and talk to you, we're always going to be encouraging those services. In contrast, we have the Transformational campus, and those are our dorms, the separate dorms for men, women, and families. And families, the family is, it's not, you don't have to have a marriage certificate. A family is whatever you present as a family, as long as you have one child who's under 18 with you. And the thing that really sets apart the Transformational campus from the courtyard is there is a higher level commitment. That higher level commitment is you have to be willing to develop a housing plan and an income development plan. And that plan is developed by the person. So you could come in and say, I want to live with my grandmother and I want to get Social Security. As long as those are realistic plans, we're willing to work with you, and you can stay as long as you need to be able to execute those plans. So as long as you're a client, you're working towards developed your plans, you're working towards your plans, and you're working on an ongoing basis with your multidisciplinary wraparound team, you can stay as long as you need. And that wraparound team, we call it Haven to Home. That wraparound Haven to Home team is a clinical case manager who's usually a social worker, a peer, a housing specialist, and an income development specialist. And so Transformational campus also, we have requirements to entry. You do have to have some kind of ID card. It doesn't have to be a valid ID card, or it doesn't have to be from the United States. We just need something that shows your picture on it, so we can compare that to the registered sex offender registry. Luckily, we're down the street. We're one block over from the jail, so we encourage anybody who has had any interaction with the jail system but doesn't have an ID to go get a printout of their mugshot, and we accept that as identification. You have to be a Bexar County resident for at least 9 months. A lot of times we use our HMIS system to see if you've had past engagements in the city to kind of establish residency. We try to be as forgiving as possible. We look at old bills, library cards, anything with your name on a piece of mail. I've even looked at a Facebook post before. We try to be as inclusive as possible to verify that 9 months. You cannot be a sex offender, because at our high point last year, we had 300 kids on campus, and the average age was 3. So we found those two populations just can't mix. So we keep the sex offenders on the courtyard. And you have to be able to pass a drug test, with the marijuana being the exception. And if you can't pass the drug test, you're able to come back 2 weeks later and try again. Or you can go across the street to the Restoration Center, which is run by one of our partners, the Center for Healthcare Services, and enter detox services. And the last, clients can stay as long as they want, as long as they're working towards their plans. And highlight our core transformational
Dave,
services.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Can I ask just a quick question? Because then I don't have to
Yes,
come up.
member Dare.
Thank you. If someone comes that's not been there 9 months, so is there another place that you can help them if they're, or do those people not get help at this campus at all? Or
No,
is it just a particular?
Great question. They go to the courtyard, and the courtyard, it's a lower barrier, and it's indoor sleeping, and all 3 hot meals a day. It's very similar to the Transformational campus, but you don't have to engage in services. So the folks who don't meet residency, the first thing we do is have them meet with a navigator over there, and we have them engage in those transformational services. So we'll get them hooked up with our employment team to try to get them a sustainable job. We'll get them hooked up with our housing team, because once they have employment, they can maintain housing. We get them a housing subsidy to move out. So we highly encourage them, even though they aren't eligible for the Transformational campus, they are eligible for transformational services on the courtyard. And if they want to be housed, we want to walk with them in that journey to be housed.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Appreciate it.
Sure. Moving back to our core transformational services, a lot of these are provided by Haven Pro, but also provided by our partners that come onto campus. We have detox and sobering and crisis, and those are served by the Center for Healthcare Services, which is our local mental health authority, and that is right across the street. So it's great. So if we're having somebody on the courtyard who finally decides they want to kick their heroin addiction, I will literally walk them across the street to detox and get them a detox bed. And then they can, after those 5 days in detox, they'll be transferred to our integrated treatment program on campus for drug and alcohol recovery. We have education programs revolving around GED attainment and linking to our community college system. We have job training programs through San Antonio Food Bank, and we have a stipend program here on campus to help people get ready to the job training skills to transition into full-time employment. We have counseling provided by Haven staff and by community-based counseling on campus. And we have legal services provided by St. Mary's and Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. Very important, we have ID recovery provided by St. Mary's and by San Antonio Police Department. ID recovery is one of those things that we didn't realize would be so integral to our operations. You can't restart your life if you don't have identification. You can't get a job. You can't apply for benefits. You can't get housed unless you have some sort of ID. So for all of our clients who don't have a valid ID or an ID at all, or a birth certificate, social security card, we start that process right away. We have partners who provide medical, dental, and vision care to both our courtyard and campus clients, and we have life skills training here on campus. I'd like to highlight our campus partners. What we do, we couldn't do what we do without our campus partners. We have over 200 partners in the communities we refer clients out to. We have 75 partners that come in and provide some sort of service on campus. And of those 75, 35 that office on campus. So some of our partners, they house all their employees on campus. Some of our partners house one or two. And we charge a very minimal fee. We call it a CAM fee, a common area maintenance fee. And I think for an office like this, you can kind of see in the background, it's about $100 a month. For a smaller cubby outside, it's $65 a month. And not only does it provide a one-stop shop for our clients on courtyard and campus, but it's a great savings to our partners, because having to open a brick and mortar operations down the street can be prohibitively expensive. So this provides some of our smaller nonprofits almost like an incubator space until they can get up and running and be self-sustainable. Highlighting some of our larger partners on campus, the San Antonio Food Bank, they provide 3 hot meals a day to everybody in the Transformational campus. We have St. Vincent de Paul, they provide 3 hot meals a day for everybody on the courtyard. They also provide rapid rehousing services, not only for Haven clients, but for clients in the community. We have the YMCA. They're the only YMCA in the United States that are co-located on a homeless shelter campus. They provide free childcare for all clients staying on campus. And the last one I'd like to highlight is the Center for Healthcare Services. They provide our sobering, detox, and crisis center across the street. And they provide an on-campus dorm program called Integrated Treatment Program. And that is a program to treat substance use and mental health issues at the same time. And that's a 4-month program. So we find that people go through that program, they either transition to our Transformational campus, transition to a sober living home, or transition to housing in the community. Looking at outcomes. Every year, we have 1,000 clients exit to a permanent housing exit destination. And so that exit destination can mean that they have a market rate apartment, they have an income-based apartment, or they've gone to live with family or friends. 85% of those exited to permanent housing retain their housing at the 1-year post-exit mark. This is an outcome that we're very proud of at Haven. We help approximately 500 clients find permanent sustainable employment. That's not to say only 500 clients find employment, but this is the individuals who find employment through our employment program. And what's great about these jobs, these are sustainable jobs, and the average wage of these jobs is $12 an hour. Kind of the biggest impact for the downtown area is that since Haven opened in 2010, there's been an 80% reduction in on-the-street homeless due to the that we counted our downtown point in time count. And I'm sure you all have a point in time count in January as well. This year, we didn't have much one. We just kind of drove around and did a visual count. But that 80% reduction number has been steady since in the last 11 years. And lastly, for the outcomes, what I want to highlight, in the last year, we've had a 28% reduction in chronically homeless. And I think that has been because of our the cooperation between Haven and our continuum of care. And Haven specifically, with funding through the city, we've developed a dorm for chronically homeless individuals that's located off the courtyard. So it's a dorm where they can come in under the influence. They can come in and have under the influence of drugs or alcohol. They don't need to have identification. But what it has provided, it's been a safe space and a kind of a landing pad for people to be found. We found that working with the chronically homeless in the community, those that are providing housing services, it's almost impossible to find somebody and to continue that work and to kind of that bridge continue until you get them to housing. By giving them a safe, stable bed, we'll be able to continue to work and to get them at a high rate into housing. Some of our program innovations. First is the Center for Healthcare Services ITP program, that intensive treatment program for substance use and mental health recovery. Haven's also increased in specialization. We have a jail reintegration program. Those are 70 beds set aside, funded by the county and funded by one of our hospital systems. For individuals who are getting out of jail, we've seen a big reduction in jail recidivism and homeless recidivism for those individuals going to that program. We have a specific program for veterans, and that veterans program, we don't do the housing. We don't do the housing internally, but we are the navigators for the community, for the community housing programs, to get those veterans quickly routed to our veteran providers. The direct referral program for the chronically homeless, which I just mentioned in the previous slide. And one of our partners has an LGBTQ youth dorm on campus. Their name is Thrive. And they've recently, in the last couple of years, got a big grant for rapid rehousing. So they're doing a great job of targeting those LGBTQ youth and getting them rapidly housed quickly in the community. Want to touch on our funding sources. Haven for Hope has an operational budget of a little bit under $25 million every year. 36% is from private contributions, 22% is from state government, and 28% is from the city and county. And a very small percent, 6%, is from the federal government, and that primarily funds our HMIS system. And that's our last slide. Some happy people I think these folks are about to be rehoused. We like to take, when we're able to, take photos of folks right before they're about to go into their forever home. And that's the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to share.
Thank you, David. That was great. And you did a good job of summarizing it in a fairly short amount of time. That was fantastic. I know, Arlo, you had a comment or a question, and then we'll open it up to the board for questions.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, David, thank you so much for all the time you've spent with us here and in separate meetings. You've been very generous sharing your ideas and experiences. And really for the board, Haven for Hope is one of the better models we've seen around the country that seems to really fit our needs here in Reno. The way we're looking at it is the courtyard portion of their facility, kind of the low barrier shelter. That's what we have under construction right now. In terms of the transformational campus, that's really what we're working towards over the next few years. We certainly have those services in various locations and elements of it, but the idea of bringing all the services together in one location to really provide a clean pathway out of homelessness seems to us to be a great model to follow. And a lot of the learning experiences they've had down in San Antonio, we're trying to learn so we don't repeat mistakes, and we do repeat what's working. So that's just what I wanted to say. And thanks again, David. You've been very, very helpful as we work to develop out our campus.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Lawson.
David, great presentation, and wow, what a cool campus that you guys have done and continue to operate. My question is, where did your funding come from to build the campus to begin with? And then the follow-up is, who's the oversight on the campus and all of that?
So our initial funding came from the chairman of our board, Bill Greehey. The campus was his idea. It's his brainchild. He worked very closely with the mayor at the time, the city council, to get it off the launch pad. And to do that, it was a pretty heavy lift. He went outside of Texas and raised $100 million for the construction of the campus. And he, through New Star and through his generous donations, he still, and through his annual golf tournament, he still provides us between $2 and $3 million a year in operating budget. The city donated the land to us, and I still think we're leaseholders for the next 89 years on it. I think, does that answer your question, Ed?
Yes, and then just who has the oversight? Is it a political or a government agency, or you guys self oversight?
We have self oversight. Yeah, it's our board of directors. But I'd say I don't want to minimize and say that we have self oversight. We make the decision we always want to make. You saw our funding pie, and it's kind of broken up into thirds, where third is private contributions, thirds county and state, and thirds city. So we're accountable to all our stakeholders, and we have regular meetings, weekly meetings with all of those stakeholders, and we make sure that we have to be doing right by not only what our board of directors is asking, but what the city's asking, the county's asking, the state's asking. So we find ourselves accountable to a lot of different individuals, and sometimes it's hard rectifying that push and pull between the politics of what needs to be done. But we try to be very straightforward and accommodating to whatever the political needs of the moment are. And I think, political needs of the moment the last couple of years have been focusing on those chronically homeless and focusing on federal funds for rapid rehousing. So we're very attuned to those, and we make the changes we need to make internally so we can satisfy those relationships.
Very good. I'm totally impressed. You guys set a high bar right there. That's pretty amazing.
David, I have a quick question, then I'm going to turn it to Member Dare. So this campus has been around since when? I'm sorry, I know you said it.
We started construction in 2008, and we opened the doors in 2010.
Okay, so you've been around for 10, 11 years. Did you, clearly with how large your campus is, how long did it take you? I mean, did you phase in some of the services over time? Did you have enough funding at the front end to kind of do it all at once? Clearly the construction looks like you had some significant capital investments to build it, but how did you phase it? What did you do first?
Our model's changed a good bit since the beginning. Really, when we opened the doors 2010, everything was built. All the computers are in place, all the office furniture was there. We were very lucky, but the partnerships were different. So Sam's Ministries, which is a big rapid rehousing provider on campus, they ran the largest shelter in town, and they shut down right when we opened. We slowly transitioned. We took about 10 over a day until their shelter was empty, and they ran our dorms for the first 4 years, until they found that it wasn't sustainable for them anymore, and they pivoted towards rapid rehousing and prevention. Goodwill ran our warehouse for the first few years, and they found that after a while that the investment didn't work for them anymore, so they pivoted out of that work, and they're more of a job training partner for us now. And the Center for Healthcare Services, one of our largest partner on campus, who runs the Restoration Center across the street and runs that specialty program, ITP, they ran our courtyard for the first 5 years. And we found that over time, it was funny, like you're in a relationship and you kind of both realize at the same time it's just not working, it's time to break up. So it wasn't working for them for a number of reasons. It wasn't working for us for a number of reasons. So we had an amicable breakup, and to where we realized that we really wanted to run the courtyard because we wanted the policy procedures to align and the core values to align with the Haven side. And the Center for Healthcare Services found out it just wasn't the budget didn't line up, and there was always going into the negative for them. So what we found is that what we thought that a lot of community partners would be willing to run, over time, it just didn't make budgetary sense, and it didn't really fit their sweet spot of what they were interested in and what they could fundraise for. So our budget was much smaller earlier on. I think we were on the 10 million mark, and every year it just kind of keeps getting a little bit bigger as we're being asked to tackle another piece, tackle another piece of the pie of homeless services. I think the biggest one is just last year as we decided to dip our toes into the HUD waters, and we applied for $3 million over 2 years and rapid rehousing funds. Because it was a request of the city and our COC, because if it wasn't applied for, it was going to be returned to the government. So I think over time you see that agencies moving into what funding streams make sense for them, what they're good at. And that's what we have to do at Haven every year is we have to take a really hard look in the mirror and say, what are we good at? What are we bad at? And the stuff we're bad at, let's not do anymore. Let's find a partner who's really good at that and recruit them to come in. Because I think that's one of the incentives on campus is we have 1,700 people on campus at any time. If you're a smaller nonprofit who's being funded, not only do you pay very little rent to be here, but it's like shooting fish in a barrel. And by that I mean you can meet all your metrics, you meet all your grant requirements because all the individuals are right here. So I think that's the value proposition to whatever partners you're trying to attract, is that it's very, very easy to meet your contractual obligations by participating in this endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Dare.
I had a similar question to you, but I'm going to restate it because I don't know that I got the exact answer I was looking for. So we're phasing in things. You guys have obviously 10 items. Let's say we're looking at 2. Where did you guys start? What did that phasing in look like? Because I think as we get ready to start, we want to make the best steps. And I don't know if you found that there was a mistake of maybe a step we should have taken that you did or you didn't. We'd love to hear that because we're about to ready to take a couple steps ourselves.
Oh, definitely. I like to do the warts and all discussion about what we've learned from Haven because, while we look polished, we did make mistakes along the way. I think the first one is we had a very heavy life skills focused training program, kind of like how to do your taxes, how do you brush your teeth, how do you change your kid. And we found that people weren't interested in that. And so what we found is that we were exiting people for not attending classes that they didn't need, and we were becoming the #1 driver of homelessness in the community. So what we had to do is we had to really listen to what our clients wanted. Our clients, they go to what they want to go to. They'll go to the classes they want to go to, like our housing classes of like, how do you access rapid rehousing? People show up for that. How do you get a job? How do you get a good paying job? People show up for that. The stuff that's really important to them, the stuff that revolves around rapidly resolving their homelessness, people engage in. And I find you always want to treat your clients with dignity and not to baby them almost and assume that they don't know how to do life skills because they're homeless. And yes, there's going to be certain people who don't have those home skills yet, but those should be optional instead of mandatory. The next thing that we learned is that early on, we did not have a link between we didn't have a housing program. We didn't have a significant housing program until about year 4 or 5, until we got a big infusion from state funding. And so what we found is that people stayed for about 2 years. Our average length of stay on the courtyard and the campus is about 4 months. So we found there was very little turnover. So once we filled up with 1,600 people, but they stayed there. So we found that until we got that housing pipeline in those first 5 years, the next 5 years was getting really our internal housing pipeline. And over the next year, my personal goal with my housing team is to solidify the relationship between our COC continuum of care and our HUD housing programs, and to get a real integrated housing program where people know where they're going to go, know where they're slotted into, and that we hold our partners accountable and hold our Haven staff accountable to reaching out to those clients. The clients can be notoriously hard to find. And I can't tell you the amount of, not even my own staff, but partner staff that say, oh, I tried to contact them once and I wrote them off. That's not good enough. You got to keep finding, you got to turn over every rock. You got to do everything you can to find that person and get them engaged and get them into housing. So I'd say, while you are starting a low barrier shelter right now, lean heavily into those COC housing partners, lean heavily into whatever housing money that you have, and to really try to build a system that recognizes the client, the struggles they face, and really strongly navigates your employees to those people, into that housing orientation, that housing first orientation.
Thank you. That was fantastic. And you know, I think we're all very interested in, as we evolve this campus into all the things it can be, while we're being realistic about what it's going to take to get there and how long and how significant the contributions from those outside of government in order for us to really facilitate this are going to be, which is a piece of the puzzle we've not fit strategically and sustainably, that I think is a huge component of this. And I know our place does a lot of these at the Women's and Family Shelter. And I just see that Commissioner Lucy took his mute button off. So I wondered if he had a question or a comment.
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the comments and discussion this morning. And David, I want to thank you for presenting and providing us with the information about your campus. I do have a couple of questions for David, and I have a brief comment. David, now the size of the campus, how many acres, how large is your campus?
22 acres.
22 acres. Okay. And is that located, where is that located in Metro San Antonio? Is that in downtown, or is that outside of?
Yeah, it's downtown adjacent, and it's a 2-mile walk, 1.5 mile walk from the Alamo. And I think the location has really been integral to attracting the downtown homeless population to accessing our services. And I think it also helps we're on a major bus line. We're close to a multimodal area, the bus multimodal area. So I think we're in a very prime location.
Okay, and that location, you know, as I'm not as familiar with San Antonio and where the Alamo is that more of a residential area? Is it just commercial, or is it just outside of city center?
It's surrounded by downtown. It's okay. Smack in the middle of the downtown area.
Okay, so your campus is right in the heart. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, it's a walking distance.
I think, you know, I think it's fantastic. You know, these are types of programs, and these are the types of campuses that we are starting to see, you know, come to fruition around the country, and providing exactly what, from start to finish, from low barrier to actual transitional housing. And, you know, we have, as the chair wanted to point out, with our place, Crossroads and Reno Works, and now we'll have the Safe Campus. We'll have a number of issues. Now, our challenges here, obviously, is we don't have 22 acres located in downtown. You know, we have a few acres here and there, and we've kind of had to piecemeal the best we could together. And I think for this board and for our Oregon, or for our county and for our community, you know, we need to continue to do what we can to elevate the programs we have. To, you know, as Member Dare pointed out, this is important that we keep kind of finding where those holes are, so to speak, and helping integrate that on a timely manner, and try to make sure that we don't redo errors from those that have come before us that have, you know, have that institutional knowledge. So I do appreciate the conversation this morning. You know, I continue to push. Hopefully we can continue to move and elevate and continue to bring our place campus forward, and work with the state to acquire more land over there, and hopefully bring Safe Campus on as quickly as possible, and provide that, because along the 4th Street corridor, where we have the multimodal and the ability for individuals to get to and from work in a timely manner, I think this is going to be something we need to continue to focus on as a region. So thank you, David. I appreciate all the comments this morning, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you, David. I appreciate your candor this morning, and your input, and you being a resource for us here in our region. We don't have 22 acres, but we do have 15 acres of Nevada Cares Campus, which we were able to acquire through CARES Act funding. which was significant, and we're very lucky to have had that. But thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation this morning.
You're welcome. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you. I hope I covered everybody. I didn't see any hands raised to ask more questions. Thank you. Okay, I would like to, if we could, because I know last month we went a little bit long. I'm trying not to do that today. If we could go to items 9 and 10 and then back to 8. I would like to do that if we could. If anybody has any objections, please speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, seeing none. We're going to go to item 9, board update and discussion on the Nevada Cares campus, including but not limited to construction, site improvements, fundraising, and stakeholders. Arlo.
Morning. I have a fairly brief verbal update on the CARES campus this morning. You've probably all seen, we're excited the building's going vertical, and we're about 2/3 of the way done with the exterior construction. So we're on track to have occupancy in early April. There's still some unknowns on whether we're going to be able to hit that April 1 timeline or need to stretch into the first or second week of April. We did bump into some construction delays. Really a couple unforeseen things hit us. One was when the excavation started, there was some undocumented materials underground where we had to over excavate and bring in good soils. So that cost us about a week. And then the big snowstorms we had were unfortunate in their timing. It came right as the concrete was going to be poured. So all that being said, we're looking at about April 1 for occupancy, but it could stretch into the first or second week of April. What that means for us is our temporary tent rentals and restroom rentals are due to expire on the 15th of this month. We're needing to extend those for one more month. We're in discussions with the rental company to see if we can get a freebie or at least a discounted lease because we've been such good customers. And in discussions with the Reno Sparks and Washoe, we're recommending that additional rental cost, which could be up to $185,000, be split in accordance with the longstanding formula for shelter operations in the interlocal agreement. We'll be back to you next month with more details on that, really, and on the next agenda item. Second part of my update is we have started discussions at the manager level with Reno Sparks and Washoe about transitioning primary responsibility for no, I'm sorry, that's on the next agenda item. The second piece of this one is our phase 2 work and our fundraising efforts. We've started discussions on what should phase 2 and phase 3 of the CARES campus be, and can we get some private donations to help with that? We'll have more detail for you next month, but what's emerging is a resource-focused phase 2 plan with some fundraising efforts and assistance to help fund that. We're looking at a new building or 2 buildings with an intake center, a resource center, a cafeteria, and a small kitchen, and some animal services, potentially a respite care facility, and bridge housing units. Part of the initial discussion involved the potential sale of the CAC to help with the funding and relocation of services from the CAC to the CARES campus. We're going to have that on our city council meeting in late March for discussion and direction as to that general concept, and we'll be back at the April CHAB with a little more detail on what that improvement plan is, the fundraising efforts, which are going to be very important to get folks other than government involved in this development program, and moving forward. Tentatively, we're hoping to have the phase 2 up and open in April of 2022. So it would be a pretty intensive kind of 12-month effort to pull that together. And then the phase 3, which is more conceptual at this point, would really focus on the housing elements. You may recall the Reno Housing Authority will take ownership of the 5-acre section of campus in about 10 months. The seller retained use for a year. And I know they're on the line here, but they're just starting kind of investigations of what transitional housing products would make sense and kind of how to develop out that section of the campus. So that would be really the phase 3 is the housing focused components. And that in a nutshell is my presentation. The team's working very hard to get the shelter portion up and running. And I should add that in the interim, before we have phase 2, we're planning to use the north end of the shelter building for offices and intake and kind of a interim resource center until we can get funding for a larger, more permanent center. Happy to answer any questions you may have, or if any of the other local staffs wanted to add anything, please do so.
Arlo, I have a question, and this may be a bigger presentation, maybe at our next month's meeting, and then I'll go to Mayor Lawson. I think it's important that we show the community and everybody kind of the phasing of this and the realities of what will come online mid-April, what would come online in approximately 12 months, and what could come online, you know, in the future after that, and kind of what it's going to take in order for us to meet those sort of benchmarks. I think the first date is critically important, that we start to get information out about what will and won't be included come mid-April within the building, and the amenities that will be there and services that will be on site, and then what would be coming in the months to follow. So we don't need to get into that, I don't think, right now, other than you know, the building will have heat, air conditioning, office space segmented for couples and pets and men, and we'll have an intake center, and we'll have caseworkers and some computers and phones and that sort of thing. But a lot of the other amenities that we saw from Haven for Hope that had some great things, those won't be online, and we don't need to, I think we just need to be clear that those things will evolve over time and they won't be there on April 15th, I guess is my point. Mayor Lawson.
My question is, how do I get a tour in the next couple of weeks or so? Because I'd certainly like to see what's going on. Obviously, you know, myself and Councilman Dare and the rest of this board are your best advocates. So knowing what's going on would be imperative from my standpoint.
Great, let's get it scheduled. You can reach out directly to me, or if Spark staff wants to be part of that tour, happy to do so.
Okay, thank you.
And Mayor Lawson, I think it's important, we, the fundraising committee has recently hired a point person that will evolve the fundraising efforts in a very comprehensive way, from materials to needs to all the things that they will need to be leader on. And I have no doubt that that will also encompass some tours as we move forward. But that person has been secured, and I think she begins, Arlo, in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Because we do understand the importance of the fundraising component for us to really have this campus be all we want it to be. And I think maybe Member Delgado, yep, Member Delgado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. I haven't seen the layout of the site necessarily. I understand there's a lot of construction going on and taking place, but who are we working with in terms of, maybe you guys have talked about this, forgive me if we've chatted about this, but in terms of consulting with providers or consulting with other participants in our community, the layout, generally speaking, of the governor's side, I haven't seen the site layout. I don't know what's next in terms of the phases or how the flow necessarily is going to take place throughout the 14 acres. Is there something that you can provide for us in the community?
There is, and we're planning that presentation at your April meeting. We've had a series of meetings with the local agency staffs and also all the service providers and interested organizations, kind of looking at the phase 1 development plan that's under construction and how that would be augmented with phase 2 work and phase 3 work. So I will distribute that. The short answer is the the new resource center and kind of services building that we're looking at would be right at the entry to the campus. We would tear down the old storage building that's right there when you come in off 4th Street and have a nice entry building with the intake center, the resource center, et cetera. We have cafeteria tentatively planned with indoor and outdoor eating options. And, you know, we could go into more details and we will next month, but part of the reason I didn't provide a detailed presentation on this phase 2 plan right now is it's still very preliminary, and we're having a lot of discussions with various interested parties to make sure that we're hitting the mark in terms of what it should include and how it should be laid out.
Yeah, looking forward to. I know there's just a lot of people in the community that I work with, and that feels they're still kind of wondering. So we're building, but not necessarily sure what we're building and how we're building it to. Seeing the presentation from Haven to Hope, it all matters in terms of the overall layout for their successes, and just I think there's going to be a lot of excitement, I guess, come April, seeing that you guys are working on a plan, but we haven't necessarily seen one. So just we'll see that in April, I suppose.
Yeah, and we did previously present the phase 1 development plan at the joint meeting when that was initially approved. So if anyone's listening and you're interested in more detail about what's being built right now, I know it's posted online, but you can just contact us and we'll get you those site plans and that information. It's the phase 2 and phase 3 pieces that are still in development.
Thank you, Arlo.
And we too, in addition to, of course, this body meets every month, we have a core group of fundraising committee, which will no doubt expand as we move forward, that is meeting multiple times every month. And then there has recently, last week, we had a community stakeholder meeting to gather their input and feedback on the things that they believed would need to be included. And you know, VOA gave some great feedback on their shelter in Sacramento and some of the things that they ran into, that maybe some pitfalls we could avoid with this new building that will be opening in April. And we will have those stakeholder meetings every month. And if people are interested in participating in those, to reach out to the city and we'll get you on those as well. This is an evolving group with lots of input, lots of moving parts, and lots of committee meetings. So it's all coming together though, which is exciting. Do any other members have any questions or comments on this particular item, which was item 9?
I just have
Member Dare.
one quick question, and I agree with Mayor Lawson. I'd love to go see it and kind of get our hands on it. Part of it is we're in the community talking about this all the time. The better we can wrap everything around it, just even like Councilman Delgado said, I think it's just crucial. But also, if you can help, I mean, there's going to be some areas you don't want us involved, but help us know where you want us involved. I've learned that over the years of being in here, that there's times we do show up and we don't. It'd be better that we left that part alone, and then where can we come in and help? Because right now these are great meetings, but we want to get in and get our hands dirty and make sure that we can help or get this rolling to the best of our ability.
Absolutely. And also, in case anybody watching or the members didn't know, there is a video being put together of the Nevada Cares campus, which I think will provide all of us and the community a great sort of visual with some data points that will really help to kind of tie some stuff together, which we will also be able to use in all of our efforts as we move forward. And that is supposed to be ready by mid-March. So we're excited about that. And thanks SOSU TV and the city of Reno and all the jurisdictions for coming together on that. I think that piece is really important for the community to visually be able to see what's happening and what's planning to happen there. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on item 9?
Madam Chair, you have no public comment on item 9.
Great. Okay, item 10, Arlo.
Yes, good morning again, and hopefully other local agency staff can jump in here on this one. In accordance with the CHAB discussion last month and the county's generous willingness to transition to be lead agency for homeless services. We have started discussions of that topic. The managers and staff met last week, and we have 2 more meetings scheduled between now and your April meeting about what that type of transition would look like, how the funding would work out. It's obviously a very big topic and complex and expensive, so they're not easy discussions to come to a resolution, but our goal is to have a framework agreement ready for the CHAB to look at your April meeting. We made some good progress at initial meetings and some offline discussions. I don't want to go into the details of those at this point, just to say there have been positive discussions. We appreciate everyone working on that. Kind of the second piece of that is the more immediate urgent need, and that involves a sanctioned camping area at the Governor's Bowl. That's something that I think there's general consensus should be done at least as a temporary emergency facility to help deal with our proliferation of encampments around the community. So as the initial step of this transition, Washoe County would be the lead agency for that managed camping area. They had an initial operating budget estimate of $500,000 annually, but I believe that excluded security services. So our plan is to develop a more detailed budget and cost share arrangement between now and your next meeting, and ideally to get that camping area opened concurrent with the shelter facility itself, so we can be more effective managing the encampments around the community and provide services to folks who may be not so inclined to stay at the shelter. Similar to the extension of the rented shelter, the discussions were that the funding for that camping area would be split in accordance with the interlocal agreement formula for this coming 12-month period. Please jump in, Sparks or Washoe County staff, if you would like to add anything there. I think in terms of the campground, kind of the point person should transition over to Eric or Kate or whoever at the county is going to kind of be lead for the design and operation of that facility. And that's my update on item 10.
Thank you, Arlo. Thank you, Arlo. Could we get some more information? I have a couple of questions. I don't know who to direct them to. Eric or Kate, or nobody's taking their computer off of mute. Oh, Kate.
I'll jump in.
There she is.
Yeah.
There she
I know Eric's on. I don't know if he's accessible right now. So
Okay.
a little bit more information, as Arlo mentioned, we have put together some preliminary needs, basic needs at the campus, what the cost might be around those, and where we might be able to get started. We are looking at tightening up that budget. We've been doing some work late last week, and then we'll get figuring that out this week, working with a potential provider to get that up and running, at least in the very short term. So that's where we are with the sanctioned camping. I know there's some dirt work that's being done, so the physical space isn't quite ready for it yet. So we'll work with Arlo to figure out when the actual grading and DG is completed so that we can get putting some infrastructure in there. And
Thank you, Kate. That is very exciting, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. With the clear understanding, we've never ventured into a safe camp before, and this is very much a pilot program to kind of see how it works and if it works. And I thank Member Hill and Lucy and everybody from the county for really stepping up on this and helping with the safe camp. My question is, and I understand there's infrastructure and dirt work and probably electrical and all the things that would need to be in place first. Do we have any idea when we anticipate maybe this going live?
I think Arlo mentioned last week that the dirt work was supposed to be finished in the next, I don't know, what was it, 10 days, Arlo, you think?
Yeah, I mentioned the bad soil. We over excavated good soil out of the Governor's Bowl. So that's going to be surfaced with DG this week or next week. So the ground surface at the Governor's Bowl, I don't think is going to be the limiting factor on the time frame. that can be put back in shape in a matter of a day or two.
Yep, so while that groundwork's being done, we'll be putting in place the mechanisms to get stuff in there as soon as we can physically get on site. There's some work that needs to be done. We need to, go down there, map it out, meet with some folks. So I mean, I'd hate to throw out a date. I know it's super urgent. I know everybody wants this to be done yesterday, as do we. We've got some folks that we love to see have the opportunity to be there as well. So just rest assured we're moving as fast as we can on it. Wanted to have this meeting as the first sort of formal announcement step that we are going to take the lead on that. So we've already had some things in the works, but this was sort of the public, Washoe County is going to take the lead on this. As you know, we did some preliminary work with the RFP, but we're moving forward. We can give you that update too, either via email or at the next meeting as well, because I'm sure we'll have plenty of progress made by then.
That's fantastic. I guess probably more, and I understand barring any sort of unforeseen hiccups and barriers along the way. I was just curious if it was maybe going to align with the opening of the main building. Do we think that's a realistic?
I mean, ideally we do it sooner than that. It's,
Okay.
you never know, as Arlo realizes when you get on site somewhere, so, but we're going to do our darndest.
That's fantastic. That's very exciting. And that is very exciting. That just made my day. Okay, do any other members have any questions or comments about the Safe Camp at this time? Member Lucy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question. One of the things I have had concerns on from some of the businesses east of Sutro down along the 4th Street corridor between actually the Our Place campus is that we have a lot of individuals looking obviously for the safe campus, and there has been some increased security issues. So I was wondering, have we had conversations with the MOST team, the sheriff, RPD, SPD to address any of those concerns along that 4th Street corridor? A lot of businesses have been reaching out saying, we've got individuals that are trespassing, and different things like that are looking for the safe camp because we're kind of relocating them. There's words out on the street, but it's not open yet. What have we done in that neighborhood in regards to security? I know I see Chief Soto's on. What are we doing to address those concerns until we get the campus up and running?
Maybe I'll try to answer, and if Chief Soto would like to elaborate, perfect. We've been doing extensive outreach through our Clean and Safe team and with the Karma Box project, kind of communicating with the unsheltered population, letting them know kind of what the plans are and what the schedules are. And essentially we're, there are a lot of encampments that are still up and are not being shut down. So we're doing everything we can to communicate those plans and schedules to everyone who might avail themselves of that service. Certainly it doesn't reach everyone, but we're doing our best to do so.
But how about outreaches to the actual businesses along 4th Street? Have you been working with those businesses that are there? I know like Casale's Halfway House is there. We've got a number of restaurants. We've got the dog daycare in place. So I mean, what outreach are we doing? Are you guys specifically doing to those businesses?
Well, we had a lot of outreach upon creation of the campus, and there's really strong business support from the areas around the CAC and East Downtown, I would say, to move those services to be a little bit more removed from the heart of the community. We did do a significant notification with our special use permit to establish the CARES campus. And I think that caught pretty much all of the businesses in proximity to the new campus. Had a number of discussions, as noted, homeless facilities aren't necessarily the most popular among neighbors, but there's also a lot of support for having a consolidated, managed, single location to help with kind of the small scale encampments that are popping up all over. So certainly any of the businesses can reach out if they haven't already. We do have full-time security out there with the temporary facility, and that's planned to continue. And part of that security team's responsibilities are to patrol the surrounding areas and make sure everything is proper and not bad things are addressed. But beyond that, we haven't had like neighborhood workshops per se in that immediate area.
Hey, Arlo, good morning. It's Chief Soto, and thank you for the question, Chair Lucy. So there's a couple things that we've done. First of all, our code enforcement has been reaching out to those businesses and how they're being affected and what nuisances or crimes they've been affected by. That's a big piece of the outreach that we've done. The focus of the outreach from our law enforcement has been more on the homeless or unsheltered population, really prepping them for what they can expect in terms of the next several weeks to months in terms of making this transition and having these types of resources that they'll be able to latch on to that maybe weren't available to them in the past, to include things like their belongings, their pets, their partners, all these things that have been challenges for our homeless population. And historically, we're starting to really outreach them. And then every week, we get a report, or I get a report in terms of how many persons we've contacted, and then how many of those persons have accepted these types of services. So if you want, I can certainly share those with you moving forward. But there has been a lot of outreach to the population. That's where the majority of our focus has been. But if you want, if you would like some additional outreach to the businesses, we can certainly extend it to all of them as well, outside of code enforcement and some of the efforts we've already made.
Chief, if you can mind, maybe you and I can talk offline and have a conversation. That would be helpful. I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And I agree. And those comments are great. And I think the missing piece that we have been working on, and I understand, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, we will have a fairly substantial sort of media push information once we can get the timeline of the campus opening and the Safe Camp opening a little more identified. I think we could probably safely say mid-April right now, but I think that's what everybody's been a little hesitant on but I get pinged, I probably get 10 emails a week asking, what are you doing about the situation of the impacts of the homeless, for the homeless, the trash, the human waste, the needles, the encampments that are in parks and along our roadways. And we've not been able to say the when. I think we've been talking a lot about the where in the Nevada Cares campus, but we've not been able to really identify the when. And I feel like we're getting to maybe not an exact date, but a range. And I think we need to push that information along with these visuals that we are gathering about what the campus is and what it will offer, so that business owners, community members, the house's population, we're all kind of sharing the same message on this topic. Because I do think there's a lot of bits and pieces out there, and we've just not got our arms around a comprehensive sort of communication piece, but that is in the works. Member Lucy, you came up.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Member Chair, and I think you're exactly right. I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, we had that presentation earlier from David with, Haven for Hope, and we talked a lot about that encompassing all around process. And you're absolutely right. We've spent a lot of time building aware for those, and trying to isolate that understanding. Now we've got to bring in the other parts of it, which is, we're trying to help not only these individuals that are impacted by homelessness, but we also have to make sure that we continue to maintain those businesses, why we're doing some of this, why we're trying to identify a specific spot, those wraparound services. We're trying to create, we can't forget one part of the community for another part of the community. We have to make sure that everybody has access to what they need. And whether that's code enforcement for businesses to make sure that people are identified and they're being protected, but at the same time, the individuals that we're trying to provide shelter and campus care for, that they have the ability for restrooms and sharps boxes, whatever that may be, it has to be all inclusive in it. And as Assistant County Manager Thomas pointed out, if the county is going to move into this position on maintaining and overseeing that, we want to work side by side with everybody here to make sure that all of those services are available, not only in Reno, but in Sparks, but throughout the county for everybody. And so it's got to be for the benefit of your businesses, for the benefit of Sparks businesses, for all of us and all around. So that's really what I want to kind of keep having at the forefront of the conversation is now that we've got the where, what else do we need to do? What else are we missing? And I think that's a prudent conversation and an ongoing conversation that needs to happen.
And I'm hopeful by our April meeting, Arlo, we will have that pretty well, if not already launched, certainly well on its way, with the understanding of what the impacts will be, and frankly, how that aligns with the expectations of the community, how all the pieces kind of fit together. So Arlo, is that fair to say that this communication piece with the visuals, with the data points, with a rough date will be buttoned up, I would think, certainly by the end of March?
Yes, that's our plan. We have a pretty significant CHAB meeting in early April lining up here with all these pretty significant topics and more detailed presentations on each of them. I would say that, we're confident enough that that April 15th date is pretty solid. We might be able to open a little early, but we've been communicating, we don't have an exact date, but it's coming this spring. And unless we get some massive series of storms or something crazy happens, we're on track to have it all open mid-April.
That's fantastic. And you've got so many great community partners that want to be a piece of sharing this exciting news out there, whether it's the Downtown Reno Partnership and the ambassadors, or the VOA employees, or Grant Denton and his River team, or all of the advocates about, what this can offer. And it really is exciting. We just have to get our arms around the communication piece and deploy it pretty wide. All right. Do any other members have any questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on item 10?
Madam Chair, we have no public comment on this item.
Thank you very much. We're going to pop back to item 8, board update on Built for Zero. Dana.
Madam Chair, we also skipped number 7, if you want to fit that in at some point.
Oh my goodness. Yes, let's go back to 7. I apologize. I drew a line right through that, thinking we've covered it. Item 7, let's go back to item 7.
At this time, Madam Chair, we will be moving over JD Kleppenstein in order to give you a brief presentation on this, as well as Juliana Mayfield.
Hey, all members of the board, can you hear me all?
Yes.
Good. It's good to see you all, and very encouraged by the conversation we've been having this morning. So I am JD Klippenstein. I am actually the State Director of Faith in Action Nevada, formerly Action, but I'm joining this morning as Chair of the Northern Nevada COC Leadership Council, and I'm also joined by Juliana Glock, who is our Vice Chair. And we're coming to you this morning to give a bit of a presentation and overview regarding our efforts to revamp our strategic plan for the continuum of care, as well as Juliana's going to talk a bit about the point in time count. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to try to get through it in a timely manner. I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee, so if I'm talking too fast, please feel free to slow me down at any point. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if that's okay.
Absolutely. And we can see it? Yes, perfect.
Excellent. All right, so just a little bit of overview in regards to what the COC is, I really appreciated the presentation from David and Haven for Hope. He mentioned multiple times the connection that they have with their COC in San Antonio and the benefits that they have from working with the COC. I just wanted to clarify exactly what the COC is. I know there's some newer members on the board and wanted to make sure we are on the same page. So the COC, the Continuum of Care, is a regional planning body that coordinates housing and services for homeless families and individuals. It's made up of both local jurisdictions as well as nonprofit partners, other service providers, a wide variety of stakeholders in the community. Our COC has been around for more than 20 years and members have been meeting regularly for 20 years or more. COCs in particular were created by HUD to streamline the funding and annual application process for federal housing and supportive services. And then the idea behind them is that in addition to overseeing the application of those funds, they then oversee the coordination of the housing services that are provided through those funds at a local level. And just to give you an idea of what kind of funding comes through because of our COC, in the 2020-2021 funding cycle, we saw $2.2 million allocated for a variety of different housing-related services through HUD. And then some specific responsibilities I just wanted to highlight here are COCs are responsible for completing the annual application for HUD funding, which everyone calls the NOFA. I think it's the Notice of Funding Availability. It's another acronym that we need to keep in our mind. Something that you'll be very familiar with, the COC is tasked by HUD to conduct the annual point in time count. I do just want to clarify something here. I know sometimes there's lots of counts. We hear lots of different numbers in terms of our homeless neighbors. The point in time count is a specific kind of count. It's a snapshot on a single day. The methodology and purpose of that count is different than maybe some of the counts that have been happening in regards to the Built for Zero initiative or some of the other related counts that happen in the community. So they're parallel, I would say they're complementary, but the point in time count is a really important and necessary activity for our community to be eligible for HUD funding. And that's something that the COC coordinates. There's also maintaining the system-wide data that we find in HMIS, gathering a governing board of which I and Juliana are sitting on, as well as subcommittees or working groups that focus on particular issues. And then one of the key things is ensuring that the region is in compliance with HUD regulations. And this is key for us to be eligible for the HUD funding that we have received that is based off of us meeting best practices and us actually having an operating COC in place that makes us eligible to receive that HUD funding. And then finally, maintaining a coordinated entry system. So while the COC has been around for over 20 years, and for a long time, the COC, both the Leadership Council and what we call the general members, or just all of the other service providers that meet on a regular basis to talk about challenges they're running into or for training and better coordination of services. For a long time, all of that was called RAW, the Regional Area Alliance for the Homeless. That was confusing at times, especially for all the different conversations that we end up in. So I want to be clear here that has always been the COC. It just wasn't necessarily called the COC. We recently made the decision for the COC, the Leadership Council, to be specifically called the Northern Nevada Continuum of Care Leadership Council. And the general members or the service providers that have been meeting the second Thursday of every month for 20 years at 8 a.m. in the morning, they are called RAW, the Regional Alliance for the Homeless. And we are essentially the same thing that we've always been. We just wanted it to be clear that this is the continuum of care. And along with that kind of rebrand and refocus, we also decided to revamp our strategic plan to make sure that it was in line with a lot of these evolving conversations that have been happening in our community in regards to housing and homelessness. because the goal of the Northern Nevada COC is to ensure homelessness is rare, it's brief, and it is non-recurring. In particular, we've been working to adopt the goals outlined in the org code report. We have spent the last year trying to adapt as much as possible to the challenges of COVID-19 in terms of providing services. I'm really excited and encouraged by the Built for Zero initiative and really see how it is strengthening the aspects of the COC, in particular in regards to data and coordination of services. And also trying to think through how do we better communicate and coordinate with all of the different stakeholders who are involved in some of the decision making in our local community around housing and homelessness. So I'm going to go through a little bit of just the highline items of our strategic plan. I am more than happy to answer questions, but I'd also encourage members of the board, if you have specific questions, please feel free to reach out for an individual meeting. Some of this might get a little bit too in the weeds. So to spare you that conversation at this point, I just want, we are more than willing to have offline conversations about more details if you have questions. So the main focus areas of our strategic plan, one was around just the COC leadership. Our strategic plan states that the first goal is to better define the relationships and establish the Northern Nevada COC Leadership Council as a leader amongst key local stakeholders such as jurisdictional leadership, such as this board, the Community Homelessness Advisory Board, as well as the Regional Alliance to End Homelessness, as I mentioned, is essentially the general membership of RAW, the service providers, social workers, the agencies that participate in service delivery. There's just a lot of people involved and a lot of changing relationships. And we thought it was important to solidify what these and better establish what those relationships are. So that's a key part of our strategic plan. And then goal number 2 is to ensure the COC is the lead in place to respond to individuals experiencing homelessness in an emergency and is connected to the regional emergency operation structure. And this really comes out of the emergency and crisis response we saw with COVID-19. I'd like to think that we won't see something like COVID-19 in the near future, but I think if it taught us anything is we need to be better. It's better to be prepared than sorry. And we've learned a lot in trying to provide services in the midst of this pandemic. And one of those things that we've learned is for emergency homeless services to be better integrated into the overall crisis response in the future would streamline things and maybe remove some of the growing pains that we've experienced over the past year. So that's in regards to COC leadership. We have a goal related to coordinated entry, and that goal is really specific, really broadly, is to expand and strengthen our coordinated entry system. And then finally, the last 3 areas of our strategic plan. One is connection to permanent solutions. And the goal here is to strengthen coordination of service delivery. And as I mentioned before, we're really excited by the Built for Zero initiative. We think is a key aspect of strengthening coordination of service delivery. And just so it's clear for the board, I think nearly every stakeholder, all the agencies involved in the Built for Zero initiative are also part of the continuum of care. So while they are, it's not being run by the continuum of care by any means, it is deeply integrated into the continuum of care. And we wanted to make sure our strategic plan wasn't duplicative, but rather taking all of that good work into account. We also are looking to enhance positive housing outcomes. Something that I have been particularly involved in here is ensuring responsive housing options are available for those who need it. That's looking at how we're using and utilizing federal funds for rapid rehousing and other things like that, as well as overall, what does it look like to build the affordable housing that we actually need in our community to truly meet the need. And then finally, it's enhancing service delivery excellence. And the 2 goals here are to ensure data integrity, utilization, and accountability. And the second goal is to provide adequate training on evidence-based practices of care. We are more than happy to share the strategic plan at any point. I'm proud to say it's a pretty short document. It's really short and to the point. The goal is for it to be a bit of a living document as well. The last time we had put together a strategic plan was quite some time ago, and we wanted it to be updated and more in line with all the conversations that are happening. And really want the Northern Nevada Continuum of Care Leadership Council to be an integrated and valuable member to these conversations and being able to contribute in terms of how we are all together tackling the challenges of homelessness and housing in our community. With that, I'm more than happy to take any questions, but I believe the rest of the slides are for Juliana and will be more focused on our point in time. But I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Do any members have any questions up to this point? And just speak up because I can't see anybody's face.
Yeah, I just want to say, JD, thank you. I can tell you this has been awesome watching everyone come together. So it's more just a comment that I think we're all heading the right direction when we're laying out a path forward, that we are making sure we're using the similar wording and we're finding ways that it collaborates instead of, I mean, I know we all have profound, amazing answers, but it's so much better when those answers just lie together. So thank you for what you're doing in your leadership there.
Appreciate that, Councilman Dare.
Absolutely. This is one of those pieces of the puzzle, critical piece of a complex puzzle that's so incredibly important. Okay, not seeing any other folks wanting to
I
speak.
have one question.
Member Hill.
Thank you. Where do we find a list of the board members for your group?
I don't know if that's publicly available, if it's on any website, but we have that along with our bylaws and the members, and I would be more than happy to provide that for you, Commissioner Hill.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you. And I think Juliana's up.
Hey there, good morning. JD, do you mind just doing the slides for me?
Yeah, I'll start for you.
Great, thank you. So my name is Juliana Glock. I work for Volunteers of America. Today, I'm here to give you a brief update on the point in time count as the Vice Chair of the Northern Nevada Leadership Council. So the point in time count is really meant to provide a snapshot of the total number of people experiencing homelessness on a given day. So we go out on a single night and we literally count the sheltered as well as the unsheltered population in the region. All of the communities across the nation are required to do a point in time count and report that data to HUD. So our deadline this year to report that information is April 30th, and it will include everybody that we counted that was unsheltered, those staying in an emergency shelter, as well as those in transitional housing or part of the housing inventory counts. So our point in time count was originally scheduled on January 28th. And you guys may remember we had heavy snowstorms during that time. And just taking into consideration for all the volunteers that were participating, their safety, we went ahead and moved the point in time count out a week and changed it to February 4th. We all met at like 4 in the morning and grouped up in small groups and went out and did the street count. So each group was paired with a member of law enforcement. There were people from each of the jurisdictions as far as the law enforcement went. We pre-mapped areas and designated those in advance to the smaller groups. We did use the Counting Us app this year to collect the information. Although we didn't do the long form surveys this year, just in order to reduce the amount of exposure, we did head count only. So we literally just counted people. All the volunteers wore personal protective equipment, as well as handed out personal protective equipment and some toiletry items to all the people that we encountered out during the street count. Okay. The unsheltered count is the only time during the year when the unsheltered is literally counted by face-to-face interaction. So the volunteers and the law enforcement, the people from the law enforcement agencies literally went out and used the Counting Us app and counted the people. This year on the unsheltered count, we counted over 772 people. There were 33 volunteers that were paired with 22 law enforcement officers. We went out to 34 different mapped areas in our region. They were various encampments, some suspected encampments. We went to some parks, and we went all down the Truckee River. This data shows the point in time count data over the last 7 years. We don't have the 2021 data on here yet. That will be available after we report it to HUD in April. So we'd be happy to come back and present that after, like in May. So the only tabulation we really have at this point is the 772 unsheltered count. So that was the end of my brief presentation. If anybody has any questions for me around the point in time count.
Actually, Juliana, can you leave this slide up for a second? Because I do have a question. This is a significant slide.
Yeah.
Hang on one second. So if I'm looking between 2019 and 2020, our unsheltered close to doubled.
Yes.
And unsheltered does not mean the individuals in our homeless shelters.
That's correct. That
Okay,
means
so-
just those outside.
So do we have a number for those that are in emergency shelter?
I do not have that number yet. So I'm working with so the city of Reno is working on pulling all that data. That data is pulled directly out of HMIS. And as well as, I believe she's collecting it even for our place. So they'll get all the emergency shelters and put all the data together, but we don't have that information yet. We only
Okay, so
have
this
the
is
unsheltered.
truly those who are out on the street in a tent or under a bridge, or who are not in any type of a motel. They have zero shelter.
Yep, that's that 772 number.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I have a quick question on that.
Yeah, member Dare.
Yes, so some of it might be thinking ahead, and we can get to that with Built for Zero, but one of the things in their presentation is going to talk about how many beds we have. And so I appreciate this count because it's so important that we know where we're at. But I think it tells us there is a disconnect between having a place for people and people either wanting help or us finding a way to show them the path to help, whatever it is, words we want to put in there. The reality is we have the ability to help this many people. It seems with the beds we have, we are just not finding that route. Am I right?
I'm sorry, member Dare. What is your exact question?
I'm just looking at I think I really probably leads us just to caseworkers is my thought is I'm looking at this number 459. I did look through the thing we're about to see on Built for Zero, and they talk about all the beds that are available in our area for help. And it's larger than this, which says, you know, we have a disconnect here going on that has to be fixable. And so that's part of where I'm just trying to, in my mind, figure out strategy, or where do we put the heart and hands to really help these 459 people?
Yeah,
Juliana, do you mind if I respond?
not at all.
Councilman Dare, I appreciate the question. I just want to make sure we're looking at the data the same way. So the 772 that we referred to previously, that was the unsheltered count for the most recent count. So that we should compare that 772 to that 459 on this slide here. So in 2020, the unsheltered count was 459. This year, and as of 2021, that shot up to 772. The beds that you're referring to also need to take into account that 514 number, as well as the 258. So those are the beds, those are currently occupied beds. So that 459 number, that is the unsheltered, and that's already taking into account the utilization of some of those beds. I'm sure that Dana and folks from Built for Zero can talk about that a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure that we're looking at the numbers the same way.
Gotcha. Thanks. So the 200 jump, I hear what you're saying as well. That's another question. Look, do we know, is this direct? Do we believe this is direct because of COVID and some of the rental issues that we've been having? Or do we have some people moving the area? Do we have any idea on any of that?
I think we can talk about correlation versus causality. I think it's definitely correlated. I would say that and I imagine that there might be some data, maybe in HMIS. I don't know if we track it at that level in terms of causes of homelessness, but I think we've definitely seen a spike regionally and across the country in terms of folks experiencing homelessness because of economic insecurity and challenges paying rent.
Okay.
May I ask a question as to why the 2021 graph is not on this?
Yeah, that data, we haven't validated and put it all together yet. We won't be doing that until April. So we can definitely come back in May and present the 2021 data on this year over year.
Okay, it would have been good that, because it was a little confusing, it would have been good to have it on
Yeah.
here. Even if there was an asterisk that said it's not validated.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the members have any questions before we move on?
Yes, I do.
Member Lawson.
So last month we were told that there's 350 empty beds, and now you're telling me that we don't have any empty beds. So I'm guess I'm missing this. I'm looking back through my notes. It's 350 available beds that have mostly some kind of a barrier to occupy them, such as sobriety. Those are from my notes exactly. What? Now you're telling me that all those beds are taken. I'm not sure the left hand knows what the right hand is doing at this point.
So I would definitely refer that question to Dana. I would just say, as I mentioned earlier, the point in time count is counting a different thing than some of the numbers that it's a different methodology for counting. So they're not. I don't think it's not oranges to oranges. It's a different kind of count for different purposes. So I don't know if you need to draw that conclusion, but I would definitely refer follow-up questions to Dana and folks from the Built for Zero initiative.
I guess we'll wait for that answer in the next presentation.
Well, and I will say, having two sets of data, and I know this is an ongoing discussion we've had for some time. You are correct, Member Lawson, that the conflicting numbers are not helpful. So somehow we've got to get to a understanding of the differences in counting, and if they were more apples to apples, how would those numbers better align, or do they? And the two sets of numbers are confusing.
Well, I think the thing just to follow up is that we need, one of the reasons why we put this board together was to bring everybody together so we were all speaking the same language. And here's a prime example where we're not speaking the same language. And we have to fix that. This is confusing when I'm out there telling the community we have 350 beds available, and then I'm told today that we have 0 beds available. So I don't know what's true now.
Mayor Lawson and Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I've been getting multiple texts from different members of the COC as this conversation has been going, and I'm sure there's some folks that can offer clarity. The one thing I would say is that I don't know if we're talking about a different language here. That the point of a point in time count is a snapshot with specific methodology required by HUD, so that we can be eligible for HUD funds. So it's not a count intended for maybe some of it's the point of the count. A point in time count is different than necessarily the point of other counts that we're referring to. So that's all I'm saying when the different methodology and a different goal for these accounts. They don't have the same goal in terms of why we're counting. But I would refer, I'm getting lots of texts. There's other folks who want to offer some other information. So I believe some of them might be able to be clarified in the next agenda item.
Thank you. And I agree. I think maybe we're just not connecting dots that we're trying to connect, but we do need better clarification for us and for the general public. We want to know how many people are unsheltered, how many people are in emergency sheltering, how many beds are available, and how's it trending? That's kind of it in a nutshell. So, all right, we'll keep moving. If someone's speaking, I can't hear them. Okay. Juliana, we're all finished with that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Members, any follow-up finishing comments, questions? I think we've been kind of clear that we need some clarity on some numbers to give us all a better idea of what's really happening. Member Hill.
I just wanted to reiterate what Judy was saying.
Oh, we can't hear you. I'm going to put myself on mute and maybe you can come in clear. It sounds like there's a lot of fuzz kind of going on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to reiterate what JD was saying is the point in time count is required for our grant funding through the funding we get for our homeless services, but that's why Built for Zero is so important, because it's a continual count that we're doing year round. Point in time, they're saying, is not as effective for us. So it's good that we're continuing the Built for Zero services, and I know we're about to enter into that item, and then we'll be able to talk about the services that we have for those folks.
Thank you for that. And maybe that was the simple sort of answer is it is precisely what the title says. It's a one moment in time count, which may not be as comprehensive and as valuable for what we do here, but more for the funding for the structure in which you need for the HUD funding. Of course, I'd say, well, if Built for Zero's numbers are larger and more indicative of what truly is out there, why can't we use those numbers? Discussion for another day. Okay, all right, moving on. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on that item?
Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, Dana, you're up. Item 8, board update on the Built for Zero initiative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, moving over Dana Searcy from Washoe County to give you her brief update on Built for Zero.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here.
We can see it and we can hear you.
Great. No fuzzies like last time.
No fuzzy.
Okay, well, good morning. Thank you again for having me, Dana Searcy from Washoe County. And as is becoming very clear, it's very complicated to bring different data systems together for that complete and accurate look at what's happening across our community. As JD mentioned, that point in time count is very important. We also have a housing count that goes along with that snapshot. Those are required by HUD. That's how we receive a lot of funding, and they are important. They are not perfect by any means, as is the Built for Zero methodology, not perfect. As both of them move forward, we should see those numbers get closer. One thing that I would mention, just we're not presenting any data about the number of individuals this month. We've skipped that as we're focusing on the housing, but I would point out the point in time count, as they went out and did a physical count, they came up with 772 individuals. And I do not have the number in front of me, but our current Built for Zero count that we are pulling out of HMIS for that by name list is only about 400 or so. So we know that there's a lot of work to do also for Built for Zero. Again, all of these people are on both teams. We're all working together, and maybe have confidence in that and let us know where we can help to bring clarity to the process. And I think that is something that we're all aware of, that very specific HUD methodology versus Built for Zero, which is let's look at your system as a whole. And you're going to see that again today in those bed numbers. So I'm going to try to be as clear as I can about where those differences may show up for you. So as you're aware, we've been working to understand the complete capacity of housing related to our homeless system. Today, I'm pleased to share with you the results of our community housing inventory. The data we're going to share today is pretty dense. There's a lot here, and it should be considered a jumping off point. One, to begin to identify some potential opportunities in our community that we could better utilize those resources that we had. And as Member Dare mentioned earlier, we do have beds available. We wish that it was that easy, that we could just recalibrate and tweak those beds a little bit, and ultimately all 772 unsheltered individuals would have a place to go. And we all appreciate it's not that easy, but there are some opportunities, and that's what we're here to show you today. So first and foremost, we'd like a couple quick thank yous. One, Brenna Nichols on my team. She's new to Washoe County, and I cannot share with you the number of hours that she spent to make sure that this data is complete and accurate for you. I also want to thank our community partners. They provided an enormous amount of time and all of their information to also ensure that the data was complete. As we've shared, we've gathered information from each of our housing programs, 28 different organizations representing 72 different programs to be exact. We've collected data related to how many beds they have and the very specific criteria associated with those beds. I hope that the data presented today serves as that foundation to ask more questions and to dig deeper. This will allow us to find those gaps in our community so that we can develop a plan on utilizing those beds more efficiently and helping those experiencing homelessness. So we have broken down all of the information into those subpopulation categories that you're very familiar with seeing in the data that we've been providing. For example, male, female families, and also vets, transitional age youth, and so on. We've also broken them down into 3 housing categories related to those experiencing homelessness. So we appreciate that there's many names out there. You're hearing them all over the place. We've got transitional and bridge and community living. We've put all of this into 3 different buckets. Bucket 1 is that emergency shelter, which is really meant to be short-term and typically provides minimal services. Temporary housing, which is designed to provide an interim stability and support to successfully move to and maintain that permanent housing that we're working towards. And this category is the big broad one that's including all of those different things that you're familiar with hearing. And then permanent housing, which in this inventory only includes permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, but we did not include anything that's kind of the next step once you've transitioned out of homelessness and you're into that, what we would consider permanent housing, which is more the affordable housing. And that's here on this next slide. We did not include affordable housing. We did not include subsidized housing or anything of that. And we know that is a big bucket also that needs to be addressed, but it is not in any of the numbers that you're going to see today. And then we also wanted to be clear about the fact that this is not the housing inventory for HUD that goes along with that point in time count each year. It is complicated. The numbers are different. For example, one thing that I know is different is in order to be counted in the numbers for HUD, you have to have all of a specific bed must be reserved for homelessness, and it cannot be used for other things. And it's gray and there's a lot of information there, and I'm definitely not the subject matter expert on that. But an example of that is Crossroads. Crossroads beds, they serve a multitude of different purposes in our community, and they are not 100% dedicated to homelessness and are therefore not in the HUD count. So last year's HUD count was 1,483 beds. On this next slide, you're going to see we're quite a bit higher than that, looking at 3,284 beds in our community right now. These are all available for those experiencing homelessness. This slide shows the breakdown of those beds on whether they have gender criteria or if they're reserved for our family population. And this chart is just further breaking down those beds over distributing them over the types of various housing that we have. And here's another look at those same 1,300, 3,200 beds. Over 600 are emergency, 1,740 are temporary, and permanent is just over 900. Sorry about that. In taking a closer look at our family units, we have 605 units in our community for families, making up 18% of the total beds and units available. This includes 32 emergency shelter units, 175 temporary housing units, and 396 permanent housing units. Our transitional age youth beds reserved for those 18 to 24 total 138 beds, making up 4% of the total. This is a substantial increase over last year because a need was identified and addressed by our community. Currently, however, our by name list includes 67 18 to 24-year-olds, which is much less than that 138 reserve beds for them. So this is a great example of a pretty dynamic situation that we can and we should adjust beds based on needs when we have the opportunity to do so. Washoe County Human Services noticed this. At the same time that this was going on, we had a large increase in the number of women who are needing support. So they've made this shift, and early this month, an additional 36 beds from this total here that you're seeing will be shifted over to the women population. Our housing is both what is referred to as site-based and tenant-based. Site-based is that traditional brick and mortar, meaning there's a physical location where beds and units are available. And tenant-based means that there's more of a voucher style where individuals or couples or families are provided support and they choose their rental unit. Tenant-based units make up 36% of our total units and beds in our community. One thing to consider for a voucher style program is that the assistance does not always cover the entire rent amount. While there are benefits to vouchers, finding affordable options given our current housing situation can be challenging for some of these families. The continuum of care, as you just recently heard, applies annually for HUD funding for housing programs in our community. These make up just 4% or 127 of the beds and units of the total capacity. Domestic violence, sexual assault, or sex trafficking beds total 135, also almost 4% of the total. Nationally, the best practice direction is to move towards a housing first model. Housing first is an approach to connect individuals and families experiencing homelessness to housing without preconditions and barriers to entry, such as sobriety, treatment, or other service participation requirements. An important distinction of housing first is that it definitely does not mean housing only, and the model depends on a robust wraparound services and in order to maximize stability and to prevent future returns to homelessness. As illustrated in numerous studies, including our ORG Code report, not only does the housing first model benefit individuals experiencing homelessness, but it also benefits our community. As we know that when people have a home, they spend less time in our hospitals, jails, and so on, resulting in reduced costs to everyone. We've identified some common barriers in our community that you're all very familiar with hearing about. One of those barriers to sheltering and housing for couples. We have 887 beds or units in our community that would allow two people of different genders to sleep in the same place. 560 of these beds are dedicated for veterans. Another barrier that we know about is pets. 26% of our community beds or units allow for pets to stay at the same location as their owner. I would say it's not represented on this slide, but a lot of these are our voucher sites. An additional 27 will consider allowing pets to stay on a case-by-case basis or offer off-care site. In both of these situations, there seems to be numerous opportunities for couples and pets, and maybe we have an opportunity here in the way that we utilize those beds to keep those options open for a couple or someone who has a pet. Mandatory sobriety requirements make up 27% of all the beds and units in our community. In looking at just our temporary housing, which by definition is the one that is designed to provide interim stability and support, 43% of those beds require sobriety. This is a large amount in our community, considering that of the 886 beds that require sobriety, only 23% or 209 of them provide licensed drug and alcohol treatment. As mentioned previously, we were surprised to hear how many open beds there were in our community. Last month, we told you there were 350. By the time we finished our interviews at the end of January, we had identified 735 beds that are open. This is equal to just about our unsheltered count at 772. This is a lot of beds. Also, as mentioned, it isn't as easy as just filling those beds with people who need them. So how is it possible that with hundreds of unsheltered people living outside in the middle of winter, that we have more than 20% of the beds and units in our community sitting open? A key reason, not the key, is that the criteria and the barriers associated with those beds are not aligning with the needs of our unsheltered population. We have criteria related to gender and subpopulations. We have criteria that lead inadvertently to barriers. Not accepting pets or couples, sobriety requirements, and background checks. While we all appreciate that some of the time these are necessary, when they are applied to many of the beds in our community, they start to raise that bar and make many of the beds inaccessible to many of those individuals. In looking only at the criteria on the previous page, we assigned a point to each item that may prove to be a barrier for certain individuals. On average, for each bed or unit, 3 or 4 criteria that we know could lead to a barrier are associated with those beds and must be met in order to qualify. Part of the goals of the Built for Zero initiative are related to helping align the type of beds with the needs to our unsheltered population. I know that not all barriers can be removed and that some criteria is appropriate to remain so that we keep everybody safe and that programs work in an efficient manner. It is a very delicate balance to ensure that our system is effective at housing those experiencing homelessness while also considering outcomes of those programs so that we ensure that we are not only housing them, but we are helping them. It probably comes as no surprise that we have a large number of veteran resources in our community. A full third of our beds and units are for veterans. This is also an area in our community where we've worked hard to align our bed structure with the best practice and really taking on that housing first model. Sobriety requirements apply to only 41 of the 1,080 beds and units for veterans. Also, we do not rely as much on emergency shelter for this population. Emergency shelter beds make up only 2% of the beds that are reserved for veterans. While there may be vets in other emergency beds that are not specifically reserved for them, the focus has been to get them into temporary or permanent housing where we can wrap around supportive services. There's a lot to digest, to dig in deeper, and to consider as we work to improve the efficiency in which we utilize our resources. This is our baseline, and from here we appear to have many opportunities that we could look into a little deeper. The good news is that we have a ton of beds. There is a lot of capacity and a lot of beds in our shelters, and the stepladder approach of emergency shelter first, and then that temporary housing, and then permanent. There's an opportunity to transition towards more of that housing first approach and focus towards getting people into housing programs where wraparound services can maximize their stability. Also, an increased housing placements could be had if we had more regional coordination. Now we're all working towards this, Built for Zero, COC. You're hearing all of us here telling you this is a part of our daily work. But we know that, for example, like I was saying earlier, if we have a lot of couple housing vouchers that could be used for couples, then we could get them housed in those voucher programs while we're reserving the single beds for that single adult population. So there are some things like that that we could do to get people housed in the interim when we don't have all these services available for everyone. We can also improve our housing placements through having a community-wide system to identify open beds. This doesn't have to be another technology system or database, but just improved coordination throughout throughout all of the organizations. As you're seeing 28 different organizations, how can we quickly identify those beds that are open and work to get them filled? And as previously mentioned, we have an opportunity to shift to a housing first focus in our community, which would help reduce costs and to help better support those that ultimately need our help. And between all of the work being done can help us to reduce those people experiencing homelessness. So a few topics that were not discussed today are analysis on data systems and how we can start to bring data together. One, so that you're not seeing a multiple of different numbers claiming, related to the same thing. We do have a complete set of data that was part of this survey. We're going to bring that back the next time we come to you with a plan to, how are we going to work over probably the next many years to bring these data systems together. And then secondly, services, who's out there providing services, outpatient services, outreach services, that piece that really isn't related to beds. That's kind of the next phase of all of this. So I, as always, appreciate the time. Thank you. I know this is a really long meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dana. And we all received this, if I'm not mistaken, in our packets. This is a lot of information to absorb and chew on, but this is exactly the data that we have been asking and longing for quite some time. And Dana, would it be fair to summarize the differences between the available beds and the need is that they're just round pegs trying to fit in a square hole sometimes because the bed may have criteria and that organization's criteria may be based on its funding requirements and its outcomes that don't allow for the entry to that bed. So there's a disconnect there, not necessarily in anyone's fault. It's just a disconnect in the need versus the criteria for availability. Is that fair?
It is fair that, we have over 700 beds that are available and over 700 unsheltered that we know about today. And that really is it. It's a square peg and a round hole. And it isn't as simple as just shifting all of these. But if we can shift a couple of programs in the right way, right? If, we know that wraparound services is great, but then you go and you apply all of these criteria and services to every bed in our program. And now all of a sudden, those with a specific background history, criminal history, or with some specific needs or looking for that low barrier approach, now we don't have enough of that. And so if we can just make some small shifts, we may open up enough beds, or at least, if we're prioritizing those who maybe need that lower barrier, let's save those beds for that population and get other people into those programs that would be more appropriate. We can make a lot of difference. And really the big takeaway here is that we've made some great strides. This does not include the CARES campus numbers. We've done some really good work. Our place came on. There's lots of opportunities that have happened over the last couple of years. We have the beds. We just need to work together, and it won't take a lot of money to do that. That's the takeaway.
Yeah. Thank you for this. I know this has been a lot of gathering of information through a lot of individuals and groups, and I know this isn't an easy task, and you have just done a great job. And we start from the data, and the data tells us a lot. And I thank you for all your work on this. I'm going to go to Member Hill, then Member Lawson.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, Dana. Great presentation. I was wondering, with the 28 organizations that we have been working with, is there opportunities for us to find financial incentives for them to coordinate more closely, work with us on the Built for Zero initiatives, that kind of idea? Is that something that we're working towards or that this group needs to be looking at for the future?
Sure. You know, it's a funny thing, data, right? Every time you get an answer, it leads to 10 more questions. And so throughout this, I will say everybody who was interviewed, they are all part of the COC. They are all part of the Built for Zero work. Everybody is very excited. The enthusiasm is there. We want to work together. We want to do a better job utilizing our resources, and everybody's at the table to figure out how. You know, the idea of a single database to put all this data, it sounds so simple. It's definitely not going to be easy. Things like funding, we added that question in, and I don't have that information with me, but just as a general question, how is your program funded? And those answers also led to a whole bunch of questions. So absolutely, you know, it's one step at a time, and we're really working hard to figure out where is all the data, what is it telling us? And then, as you mentioned, Commissioner Hill, to dig in and can we align those funding streams? Can we support? Where does it make sense? Where does it not make sense? And, you know, I would say the team came out of this with 500 questions that we could dig into and analyze. And so we'll take your lead, we'll take the work that we're getting and the lead from our partners, and we'll just start to dig in.
Very much. Member Lawson.
So Dana, thank you. That's good news. Are we even asking the question though? You know, so let's say you have 100 beds. Can you give us one that's low barrier? You know what I'm saying is we don't want all 100 beds, but can we get one or two or five? And that's kind of what I'm doing with my developers in Sparks. When they come to me at the project is, can you give me just one affordable house, one unit that's below the PMI? Or excuse me, whatever the poverty, whatever. I forgot I've got all these acronyms running in my head. So
no, I understand. It's like a foreign language. But yes, you're right on, Mayor Lawson. That's kind of that next step, right? This is definitely the baseline. We just threw a whole bunch of data at you. We have a ginormous spreadsheet with everything in it, but really it's okay, now how do we improve housing placements, and what does it take, and why aren't we utilizing those beds, and how can we look for opportunities that are low barrier and then reserve them for the population that really needs that low barrier approach. So that's our next step. We will definitely look to do what you're mentioning. You know, if you can't give us the whole program, can you just set aside a couple? And how do we make sure that people in our community know that those are there? How do we spread the word? You know, that's part of this too.
But keeping in mind the success and longevity of a program is sometimes built around the structure in which it has in place. And there could be detriments to the rest of the population if you start low. I can imagine, like, I'll take Crossroads. Crossroads has a very structured and successful program. So what if you say one or two of the beds have to be low barrier? Is that compromising the balance? Because they're saying, well, why does this person not have to abide by the same structure and criteria that the rest of us do? You know, I can imagine these are the conversations you're having and how complex this can get. We certainly don't want to upend the success of a program by lowering a barrier, but there is probably the nuance that can help us to access some of the beds. We're going to go to Member Lawson had something quick, and then to Member Dare.
Well, quick follow-up. There's the line in the three best answers. The best answer is yes, second best is no, and the third one, the worst, is maybe. So if we don't ask and they say no, I'm okay with that. We're not going to force anybody to do anything, but they may find a way. People are a lot more creative than we give them credit for. Just try and box in any small businessman into conforming to something the government wants him to do. He'll figure out how to get around it. So it can happen if we just ask.
And just one comment to that, one of the best things about Built for Zero is that they really encourage us to not look program by program, but at our community as a whole. So if we can find a couple of pockets of that low barrier that we can use in, to serve everyone across the whole community, then we don't have to look at programs that are very specific like Crossroads and those criteria and rules, and that is related to the outcomes that they're seeing. So that's kind of the good thing, is that we're all in it together.
So true. Member Dare.
So I'd encourage us to look at caseworkers as our bridge from where somebody's at to a program we have. And the reason I say that, for a few reasons, is just people are just from my work with people, everyone is so different. You can create as many different combinations and paths for people, and you're going to find that it's easy to have obstacles just because their life is just so different. Everybody has different personalities, different things of their past, different fears of the future, whatever it is. And so things that would keep them away. But a caseworker gets to come in and kind of craft the connection here and then craft the connection here. And so I say that one of the things that I think could be really good as part of our strategic look as we come is how many caseworkers do we actually have for the work we're doing, and make sure that number is a part of our constant look, because we know we don't necessarily have the money to have what we need now, but I don't believe we're going to see those numbers shift. It's kind of back to the conversation we had before with our count, and then now those beds and people not being connected and not stepping in. We can change the outside of that door as often as we want, but if we don't have someone who's kind of laying that out for them, that bridge, I just find it doesn't work. And not only that, even if you can get them in there, they don't stay because there's not the rounded accountability, but also the hope and some of the distractions. A lot of things happen. So if we can have that, it's not just getting them to where they'd want a bed, it's that they would stay there and find the help they need. And so, because even if we could entice them to say, come, our job's not even close to being done, it's going to be that next piece. And so I would just say that this idea of looking at that. Now, when I say that, it's not necessarily just the county caseworkers that I'm talking about. I'm saying it might be really neat to kind of look at large, our community, what caseworkers do people bring to the table? And we can say at large, we have this many, here's a goal, just at least to get it in our mind. Because I just question if we're going to see the real change of help that's needed without it.
I agree. Do any other members have any questions or comments on the Built for Zero presentation at this time? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Madam Chair, you do not.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to item 11, board member announcements and updates, including future agenda items. Do any members have any? Okay, I'm not seeing any hand. Oh, I do. Member Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Sheriff's Office and the police for both jurisdictions are coming to the next meeting. Is that what you stated?
Yes.
Okay, so our meeting in March. And it would be great if we could add to that meeting because we had heard from a lot of community members about this idea of Right to Rest Act. And it would be good if we could just address, why we have the laws we have on the books and what that looks like, and how we're enforcing that today as a part of their presentation, just because I think there needs to be a little bit of clarity on that.
Thank you very much. And I agree. And I have already asked that when they give that presentation that they particularly emphasize their outreach efforts and the social workers and the work that they do in collaboration with our law enforcement to really hit on that point. So I think that's really important too. Any other members have any additional items for our next meeting? Okay, seeing none. Item 12, Madam Clerk, closing public comment.
Yes, Madam Chair, to note for the record, items received in this category are for general public comment or for public comments received after 4 p.m., the business day preceding our meeting, which would have been Friday at 4 p.m. We received general public comment from Amy Hadley, Richie Benarski, Rain Fernandez, Jose Manuel Cruz, Ilyar Botman, Natalie Enriquez, Jay Maynard, Kelsey Hoffman, Heidi Sijuan, and Joanna Grantham. These have been additionally, Natalie Handler was also received in public comment earlier. These have been submitted to the advisory board and are part of the official record. And with that, Madam Chair, you have no further general public comment.
Thank you very much. At this time, we are looking to adjournment. May I get a motion? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Seeing none opposed, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.